The war zone was already lost. Across the endless dark of space, alien fleets moved like a living storm, spreading fire and ruin wherever they passed. Planets that once shined with life were now burning spheres, their skies broken, their cities turned into dust. Massive alien warships floated calmly as they fired again and again, as if destruction was just routine work. Signals of distress filled the void, desperate cries from colonies that knew no one was coming to save them. One by one, those signals went silent. To the rest of the galaxy, it was clear that this war had already been decided. The enemy was too strong, too many, too fast. No fleet had been able to slow them down, not even for a moment. At the center of this fear, the Galactic Council watched from a protected command station far from the fighting. Ancient beings, old empires, and advanced species sat together in silence, staring at the live battle feeds. Their faces showed defeat, not anger, not hope. They had sent fleets, they had tried diplomacy, they had even tried surrender talks. Nothing worked. The alien invaders did not want land or resources alone. They wanted total control, and they would erase anyone who stood in their way. A quiet voice finally broke the silence in the council chamber. It was not loud, not strong. It was tired. Someone whispered the words that everyone was already thinking. Humanity is too late. The sentence spread through the chamber like a disease. Heads lowered. Some closed their eyes. Humanity had promised to come, but space was vast, and the enemy moved faster than expected. The council had placed their last hope on a species that was still considered young and emotional by many. Now that hope felt foolish. The Warzone feeds showed another planet cracking apart under heavy bombardment. Millions of lives ended in seconds. No dramatic explosions, no heroic last stand. Just silence. The council members knew this would continue until there was nothing left to fight for. In the Warzone itself, alien commanders felt complete control. From their massive flagships, they observed the destruction with cold satisfaction. Their fleet formations were perfect, layered defenses overlapping, weapons always charged. They had studied every known species in the galaxy, learned their tactics, their weaknesses, their limits. Humanity, to them, was nothing special. Loud, brave, emotional, but predictable. Humans talked about honor, about lines in war, about rules. That made them weak. One alien commander even laughed as he watched a human colony burn on the edge of the war zone. He believed humans would arrive too late, broken by fear and loss, if they came at all. To him, the war was already finished. Then something impossible happened. Without warning, space itself seemed to tear open. Sensors across the entire war zone screamed in confusion. Energy readings spiked beyond known limits. The dark void twisted, light bending in strange ways, as if reality could no longer hold its shape. Alien commanders shouted orders, demanding explanations, but their systems struggled to understand what they were seeing. In the next instant, thousands of massive objects appeared out of nothing. Human warships, not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. They arrived at once, perfectly aligned, filling the space between stars like a steel wall. There was no slow entry, no formation ceremony, no broadcast message. 1 second the enemy ruled the war zone. The next, humanity was there. The sudden silence was heavy. No human signals were sent. No speeches about justice or revenge. The human fleet did not announce itself. Weapon systems powered up quietly across every ship, energy cores glowing with controlled force. The alien fleets hesitated for the first time since the war began. This was not how humans were supposed to arrive. The Galactic Council froze as they watched the feeds update. Their sensors confirmed it again and again. This was not a scouting force. This was not a rescue fleet. This was everything humanity had. The scale alone was shocking. Human ships were different from others in the galaxy. They were not elegant or beautiful. They were solid, heavy, built with one purpose: war. Thick armor covered their hulls, scarred and dark, carrying marks of past battles. Massive cannons sat along their sides, silent but ready. Smaller attack craft waited inside launch bays like predators held on a chain. Still, the human fleet did not move. They did not rush forward. They did not retreat. They simply existed, an unmoving presence that changed the balance of the warzone just by being there. Alien commanders quickly recovered from their surprise. Laughter returned to their voices. They had numbers. They had experience. They had already crushed stronger fleets than this. They believed humanity had come to witness their own failure. Orders were given to prepare standard engagement formations. Alien ships shifted positions, creating wide firing arcs, layered defenses activating as they had countless times before. This was routine. Humans, like all others, would break when faced with overwhelming force. But then the human fleet did something no one expected. They did not form battle lines. They did not spread out or create defensive patterns. Instead, the entire fleet moved forward as one, accelerating directly toward the heart of the alien formation. Straight in. No caution. No delay. Galactic Council members leaned forward in shock. Some shouted in disbelief. This was madness. Every known rule of space warfare said this was suicide. Charging into the center of an enemy formation meant instant destruction. Alien commanders laughed openly now, mocking the humans for their stupidity. Weapons locked, targeting systems aligned, firing solutions ready. The enemy was certain this charge would end humanity in seconds. But as the distance closed, something felt wrong. Human ships did not slow down. They did not change course. Their formation stayed tight, precise, like a single blade aimed at the enemy's heart. Alien sensors began to fail, overwhelmed by strange energy signals coming from the human fleet. Communications flickered. Targeting data lagged. Confusion spread across enemy command bridges. Orders were repeated, then shouted, then screamed. The laughter stopped. A deep, unfamiliar fear began to grow. The human fleet was too calm, too controlled. There was no panic, no hesitation. It was as if they had already seen this battle play out and knew the ending. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence. They realized something important in that moment. Humanity had not come to fight a long war. They had not come to negotiate or defend territory. They had come to end it. As the fleets closed in, the first alien shots were fired. Bright energy beams tore through space, aimed at the center of the human charge. But the results were not what the enemy expected. Human ships did not scatter. They did not explode. Their shields absorbed the attacks in strange ways, bending energy aside, redirecting it, learning from it. With every hit, human defenses adapted. Alien commanders stared in disbelief as their most powerful weapons failed to slow the charge. The distance vanished in seconds. Then, without warning, human weapons activated. There was no dramatic sound, no bright show. Enemy ships simply ceased to exist. Precision strikes cut through command vessels, carriers, and weapon platforms all at once. Entire sections of the alien fleet went dark in a single moment. The warzone, once full of noise and chaos, became eerily quiet. Fear was no longer a slow feeling. It was instant. It hit the alien fleets like a physical force. This was not a normal enemy. This was something prepared, something focused, something final. The human ships continued forward, deeper into the enemy formation, not stopping, not turning back. The alien commanders finally understood their mistake. Humanity had not arrived too late. Humanity had arrived exactly on time. And in that moment, as the first lines of the alien armada collapsed, fear was truly born, not just for the enemy in the warzone, but for the entire galaxy watching. Realizing that the rules of war had just changed forever, humanity did not slow down after that first impossible strike. As the human fleet pushed deeper into the warzone, the galaxy began to remember how it had treated humans before this war ever started. For centuries, humanity had been underestimated, talked down to, and quietly mocked in council halls and military briefings. Other species called them reckless, too emotional, too divided to ever stand as a true galactic power. They said humans argued too much among themselves, that they fought small wars on their own worlds instead of focusing on unity. Even when humanity joined the Galactic Council, they were given small roles, minor patrol zones, and little trust. Humans noticed this, but they did not protest loudly. They listened. They learned. They remembered every insult, every doubt, every moment when help was denied to them in the past. Now, in the burning heart of the war zone, those memories were not spoken aloud, but they lived inside every human ship. Alien commanders still tried to understand what they were facing. They believed the sudden human success was luck or a hidden weapon used only once. They ordered counterattacks, heavy fire, and desperate maneuvers. Yet every move they made was already expected. Human ships shifted slightly, not in panic, but with calm precision, like predators adjusting their steps. Inside human command vessels, there were no cheers, no celebration. Officers stood quietly at their stations, eyes focused, voices steady. Many of them had lost worlds already. Some had lost families, entire bloodlines erased in the first waves of this war while the galaxy debated and delayed. Those losses sat heavy in their hearts, not as rage that blinded them, but as pain that sharpened their focus. Humanity was not fighting for glory. They were fighting because they knew exactly what happened when no one came to help. The alien fleets began to feel something unfamiliar. Confusion turned into dread. They had expected humans to hesitate, to communicate, to warn, to demand surrender. That was how wars usually went. Instead, humanity said nothing. Silence followed every human action, a cold and terrifying silence that felt more threatening than any battle cry. The Galactic Council watched as enemy formations broke apart under pressure they could not understand. Council members exchanged uneasy glances. Some felt relief, but others felt shame. They remembered the meetings where they delayed sending aid to human colonies, choosing politics over lives. They remembered calling humanity too young to be trusted with real responsibility. Now those same humans were standing alone against a force that had crushed the galaxy's strongest empires. On the battlefield, alien soldiers began to panic. Emergency signals flooded their networks. Retreat orders were issued, then canceled, then issued again as command ships disappeared one by one. Every attempt to regroup failed because human ships did not give them time. Humanity pressed forward with unstoppable momentum, not rushing, not wasting energy, just advancing like an incoming tide that could not be argued with. Inside one human flagship, a senior commander paused for a brief moment, staring at a holographic map filled with destroyed worlds. Each marker represented millions of lives lost. His expression did not change, but his hands tightened slightly. He remembered a time long ago when humanity begged the Council for faster action, for stronger protection, for unity against growing threats. Those requests were answered with promises and delays. That memory hurt more than any wound. But humanity had learned from it. They had learned that survival in the galaxy did not belong to the loudest voice, but to the species willing to prepare in silence. Alien commanders finally tried to communicate. Their messages were chaotic, filled with anger, confusion, and disbelief. They demanded explanations. They accused humanity of breaking the rules of war. The human fleet did not respond. To them, those rules had already failed countless innocent worlds. What use were rules if they protected only the powerful and ignored the weak? Humanity's answer was action, not words. As more enemy ships fell, something deeper broke inside the alien forces. This was no longer just a military defeat. It was a collapse of belief. They had believed themselves superior, untouchable, destined to rule. Now they faced a species that did not seek domination, only an end to the threat. That purpose made humanity terrifying. The Galactic Council began to understand the emotional weight behind the human advance. This fleet was not driven by hatred alone. It was driven by memory. Memory of abandoned colonies. Memory of unanswered calls for help. Memory of standing alone while the galaxy watched from a safe distance. Humanity carried all of that forward, turning pain into discipline, grief into strategy. In the war zone, stars burned quietly as wreckage drifted through space. The enemy still had numbers, still had weapons, but they had lost something far more important. They had lost control of the moment. Every second that passed belonged to humanity now. Fear spread faster than any signal, jumping from ship to ship, from commander to soldier. Some alien crews froze at their stations, unable to act. Others fled blindly, only to be cut off by human units that moved as if they already knew every escape path. Humanity did not chase with anger. They closed nets with patience. The emotional truth became clear to everyone watching. Humanity was not here to prove they were strong. They were here because they refused to ever be helpless again. Each destroyed enemy ship was not celebrated. It was accepted as necessary. Each victory carried sadness, not joy, because humans understood the cost of war better than most. They had lived with it for generations. As the second phase of the battle unfolded, the galaxy felt a shift that could never be undone. Humanity was no longer the underestimated species on the edge of galactic politics. They were the line between survival and extinction. And as their fleet continued forward without pause, without mercy, without hesitation, one emotional truth echoed silently through the stars. Humanity would never wait for permission to protect life again. The third phase of the battle did not begin with a loud command or a dramatic signal. It began with understanding. The alien fleets finally realized that humanity was not reacting to the war zone. Humanity was controlling it. Every movement of the human fleet felt planned long before the first shot was fired. Enemy commanders tried to adapt, shifting formations, pulling forces back, and launching heavy counterstrikes meant to overwhelm the human advance. But each attempt failed faster than the last. Human ships adjusted instantly, changing angles, speed, and spacing with perfect coordination. It felt less like a fleet and more like a single living mind moving through space. Inside the human command vessels, the mood remained quiet and focused. Officers spoke in low voices, reporting losses, damage, and enemy movements with calm honesty. There was no panic when a human ship was hit. There was no shouting when alarms sounded. Every crew member knew why they were here and what was at stake. Many of them had personal memories tied to this war. Some had watched their homeworlds burn through distant screens. Others had escaped in small civilian ships while everything they loved was erased behind them. Those memories were heavy, but they did not weaken the humans. They made them steady. The human fleet began to show its true method of war. Instead of attacking randomly, they targeted the enemy's ability to think and react. Communication hubs were destroyed first, followed by sensor platforms and command carriers. Alien ships still had weapons, but without coordination, their power meant nothing. Confused orders clashed across enemy channels. Some units charged forward blindly. Others froze, waiting for instructions that would never come. The emotional balance of the war shifted completely. Alien crews felt abandoned by their leaders, cut off in the dark, hunted by a force they could not see or predict. From the perspective of the Galactic Council, the battle had become painful to watch. The feeds no longer showed two sides fighting. They showed one side being slowly, carefully dismantled. Council members saw alien ships drifting helplessly, systems dead, crews trapped in silence. Some council members felt relief that the threat was ending, but others felt a deep unease. This was not chaos. This was controlled destruction. Humanity was ending the war with intention, not rage. On one human destroyer, a young officer watched the battlefield update in real time. He had lost his sister on a frontier colony during the first invasion wave. Her final message had been short, full of fear, asking if help was coming. He never got the chance to answer. As enemy ships vanished from the map, he felt no joy, only a quiet sadness and a sense of duty. This battle was not about revenge for him. It was about making sure no one else would ever send a message like that again. The alien commanders who remained tried one final tactic. They redirected massive firepower toward the densest part of the human fleet, hoping to cause enough damage to break their momentum. Energy beams and missiles filled space, turning the war zone into a storm of light and debris. For a brief moment, it seemed possible that humanity might finally slow. Then the human fleet adapted again. Ships shifted positions with flawless timing, sharing shield energy, absorbing damage meant for others. Some human vessels took heavy hits, but none broke formation. Even damaged ships stayed in place, weapons firing until the last system failed. There was something deeply emotional in that sight. Humanity was not abandoning its own. Every ship mattered. Every crew mattered. That unity sent a silent message across the battlefield. Alien crews watching from their failing stations felt something close to despair. They had never fought an enemy that valued every life so strongly while still advancing without mercy. As the third phase continued, the enemy's strongest carriers were neutralized one by one. Each loss echoed across alien networks, breaking morale further. Panic spread faster than any weapon. Some alien soldiers refused to fight, shutting down systems, hoping to survive by hiding in the wreckage. Humanity did not hunt those who no longer posed a threat. Their focus stayed on ending the war, not feeding fear. This restraint made their actions even more terrifying. They were not out of control. They were disciplined. The Galactic Council finally understood the emotional core of humanity's strength. Humans had suffered enough wars to learn the true cost of violence. They did not glorify it. They endured it when necessary. This made their presence in the Warzone feel final, like a closing door. As the third phase drew toward its end, entire sections of the enemy fleet ceased to function. The Warzone grew quiet again, broken only by drifting debris and distant fires. Humanity's fleet continued to move forward, steady and unbroken, carrying with it the weight of countless lost lives and the promise that this nightmare would not continue. In that moment, the galaxy began to accept a difficult truth. Humanity was not just winning this war. They were redefining what it meant to fight for survival. By the time the fourth phase began, the enemy no longer felt like a united force. What had once been a proud and unstoppable armada was now a scattered collection of frightened ships, damaged systems, and broken command lines. The alien commanders who were still alive struggled to hold control, but control itself had become an illusion. Orders were delayed, repeated, or lost completely. Some ships received 3 different commands at once, each telling them to do the opposite of the other. In that confusion, fear grew heavy and personal. This was no longer a war fought by empires. It was a fight for survival felt by every individual crew member. Humanity sensed this shift immediately. Human fleet movements slowed slightly, not from weakness, but from purpose. They adjusted their advance with care, closing off escape routes and surrounding enemy clusters without rushing in blindly. It was like watching a storm learn how to think. Human ships formed silent arcs through space, cutting off paths, sealing exits, and forcing the remaining enemy forces into smaller and smaller zones. Inside human vessels, the emotional weight of the battle deepened. Crew members stared at screens filled with enemy ships broadcasting panic signals and emergency codes. Some of those signals were not threats or commands. They were pleas. They carried fear that sounded uncomfortably familiar to humans. It reminded them of their own past, of the days when human colonies had sent out distress calls that went unanswered. For a brief moment, some human officers felt hesitation in their hearts. Not because they doubted their mission, but because they understood exactly what the enemy crews were feeling. That understanding did not stop them. It hardened their resolve. Humanity had learned that allowing a threat to survive meant allowing future suffering. Emotional weakness now would only lead to greater pain later. The alien commanders tried to regain control by turning to fear of their own. They issued brutal orders, demanding that their crews fight to the last ship. Some commanders threatened punishment or extinction for those who retreated. But those words carried no power anymore. Crews could see the truth with their own eyes. Their leaders were no longer protecting them. They were sacrificing them. That realization shattered what little loyalty remained. Entire alien units shut down weapons or drifted aimlessly, unwilling to continue a battle they knew was already lost. Humanity responded with cold clarity. Ships that powered down and stopped fighting were marked and bypassed. Human fleets focused only on active threats, moving past helpless targets without wasting fire. This behavior spread confusion among the alien forces. They could not understand an enemy who advanced without cruelty yet without mercy. Created a deep emotional shock. The Warzone felt wrong to them, like reality itself had turned against their expectations. The Galactic Council watched this phase with conflicted emotions. Some members felt relief that humanity was showing restraint. Others felt fear, realizing that this restraint was a choice, not a weakness. Humanity was deciding who lived and who did not based on behavior, not species. That level of judgment carried enormous power. Council members remembered past debates where they had argued whether humans could be trusted with such responsibility. Now that responsibility was already in human hands. On the battlefield, the fourth phase reached a breaking point when one of the enemy's largest remaining command hubs was surrounded. It was a massive structure, once the heart of enemy coordination. Now it floated damaged and isolated, shields flickering. Inside, alien leaders argued loudly, blaming each other, denying reality. Some demanded a final charge. Others wanted to surrender. Their voices overlapped in panic and despair. Outside, human ships waited in silence. They did not fire immediately. They gave time to choose. That pause carried heavy emotion. Humanity was offering something rare in war, a chance to stop. The alien command hub finally sent a fragmented message. It was not a formal surrender. It was fear shaped into words. They asked why humanity continued to advance when victory was already clear. The human response was brief and calm. They stated that the war would not end until the threat could never rise again. That answer carried no hatred, only certainty. When the command hub attempted to restart weapons, humanity acted without hesitation. A focused strike ended it in seconds. The explosion was contained, precise, final. The remaining alien ships felt the impact emotionally even more than physically. The last symbol of leadership was gone. Panic collapsed into silence. As the fourth phase ended, the war zone entered a strange quiet. Fires still burned, wreckage still drifted, but organized resistance had almost vanished. Human fleets held position, scanning, waiting, ensuring there would be no sudden return of danger. Inside those ships, some crew members finally allowed themselves to breathe. Some closed their eyes, thinking of the people they had lost. Others stared into the darkness of space, wondering how many lives could have been saved if help had come sooner in the past. Humanity carried that sadness forward, not as regret, but as responsibility. The galaxy was changing, and humans were shaping that change with every careful decision. The fourth phase proved something powerful and emotional to everyone watching. Humanity was not just ending a war. They were showing the galaxy what controlled strength looked like, and why it should never again be mistaken for weakness. By the fifth phase, the truth that the galaxy had avoided for so long could no longer be hidden. Humanity was not winning because of a single powerful weapon or advanced ships alone. Humanity was winning because of something far deeper, something shaped over generations of loss, fear, and survival. As the human fleet held control over the broken war zone, a new pattern became clear to every observer. Human ships were changing their behavior based on everything they experienced in real time. Enemy tricks stopped working almost the moment they were used. New tactics failed before they could fully form. It felt as if the human fleet was learning faster than thought itself. Alien scientists watching from distant systems finally spoke the words no one wanted to hear. Humanity had fused strategy with emotion. Not wild emotion, not rage, but memory. Every human ship carried more than weapons and armor. It carried the memories of burned cities, lost colonies, abandoned allies, and silent graves drifting in space. Those memories were not weaknesses. They were data. They were lessons carved into human thinking. Inside the human command network, old recordings played quietly in secure channels. Distress calls from long-dead colonies. Council debates where action was delayed. Promises that came too late. These were not played to fuel anger, but to remind commanders why hesitation was dangerous. Human officers listened with calm faces and steady hands. Their eyes showed pain, but their voices remained controlled. They understood something the galaxy had failed to learn. Emotion did not have to break logic. When guided, it could sharpen it. Alien forces tried one last coordinated response during this phase. A hidden reserve fleet emerged from deep space, attacking from behind what they believed was a weak human flank. For a brief moment, hope returned to the enemy. They believed they had finally found a crack in humanity's armor. That hope died quickly. Human ships did not turn in panic. They did not scatter. Instead, they adjusted formation smoothly, as if this attack had already been expected. Smaller human vessels moved to shield larger ones without being ordered. Damaged ships placed themselves between enemy fire and civilian evacuation routes still active in nearby systems. That single action sent a powerful emotional wave through the galaxy. Humanity was not only fighting the enemy, they were protecting life even in the middle of destruction. The reserve fleet was dismantled with terrifying efficiency. Precision strikes disabled engines first, then weapons, leaving enemy ships drifting and powerless. Human forces moved past them, focused on the greater threat. This behavior confused alien commanders beyond understanding. They could not understand why humans spared some ships and erased others. The answer was simple, though painful. Humanity remembered what it felt like to be helpless. They refused to become what they once feared. The Galactic Council finally received a direct human transmission during this phase. It was not a threat. It was not a demand. It was a statement. Humanity explained that this war was the result of ignored warnings and delayed action. They said they would finish it so no future council would ever face the same choice again. The message carried sadness, not pride. Some council members felt shame burn deeply inside them. They remembered voting against human proposals for shared defense systems. They remembered saying humans were too emotional to lead. Now those same emotions were saving the galaxy. In the Warzone, human crews began to feel the weight of what they were doing. Some stared at drifting wreckage and wondered how many lives had been lost on both sides. Medics moved quietly through damaged ships, helping wounded without complaint. Engineers worked past exhaustion to keep systems running. No one spoke of medals or glory. This was not victory to them. It was duty carried to its end. The enemy, broken and scattered, finally understood the secret they had overlooked. Humanity did not fear war because they loved peace. Humanity feared war because they understood it too well. That understanding made them unstoppable when pushed too far. As the fifth phase closed, the Warzone belonged completely to humanity. Not through chaos, not through blind destruction, but through controlled, emotional intelligence shaped by suffering. The galaxy watched in silence as one truth settled deeply into every mind. Humanity's greatest weapon was not their fleet. It was their memory. The sixth phase began when the enemy made their final mistake. Believing that humanity had already committed all its strength, the remaining alien leaders ordered the last of their hidden forces into the Warzone. From distant jump points, millions of ships emerged at once, filling the dark with new shadows. To the enemy, this was their last hope. If they could drown humanity in numbers, if they could force chaos through sheer mass, maybe the war could still be turned. For a brief moment, even the Galactic Council held its breath. The sensors showed an overwhelming surge. Any other fleet would have been crushed under that weight. Humanity did not retreat. They did not panic. They changed. Across the human fleet, formations broke apart in perfect unison. Large battle groups split into smaller, faster units, each moving independently yet connected by an unseen thread. It looked chaotic from the outside, but it was not. This was a tactic humanity had learned from centuries of fighting wars where they were always outnumbered. Inside human ships, commanders spoke with quiet certainty. They had trained for this exact moment. Every crew member knew their role not because of fear, but because of trust. Trust built through shared loss, shared training, and shared purpose. As the enemy fleets rushed forward, they found nothing solid to strike. Human units slipped through gaps, appearing where they were least expected. Attacks came from every direction at once. Not heavy blows, but precise cuts. Engines failed. Weapon systems shut down. Command ships vanished before they could issue orders. The enemy's massive numbers became a weakness, blocking their own movement and communication. Emotionally, the battlefield shifted again. Alien crews felt trapped inside their own strength. Panic spread as escape routes vanished. Human ships moved with calm patience, never wasting energy, never chasing blindly. They closed the space slowly, carefully, like a net tightening. The Galactic Council began to understand the emotional truth behind this tactic. Humanity had never relied on superiority. They had survived by adaptation. For generations, humans had faced stronger enemies, harsher worlds, and impossible odds. Each time they learned. Each time they changed. This war was simply the final expression of that lesson. On a human cruiser near the edge of the battle, a veteran commander watched his fleet maneuver through the chaos. He remembered his first battle long ago, when fear had nearly frozen him. He remembered friends lost because they hesitated. That memory guided his decisions now. He did not raise his voice. He did not rush. He trusted his people. That trust flowed through the fleet, creating unity stronger than any formation. As the sixth phase intensified, enemy reinforcements continued to arrive, only to be absorbed into the same crushing pattern. Human fleets anticipated every move, redirecting pressure where needed, supporting damaged units without hesitation. When a human ship was disabled, nearby vessels moved instantly to protect evacuation efforts. No one was left behind. That promise carried deep emotional weight. Humanity was not fighting as machines. They were fighting as a family that had learned the cost of loss too well to repeat it. The enemy's final morale collapsed when they realized humanity was not slowing down. Hours passed, then more, and still the human advance continued. There was no fatigue in their movement, no desperation in their attacks. The enemy had expected a final dramatic clash. Instead, they were being quietly erased from the battlefield. That quiet was terrifying. As the sixth phase drew toward its end, the war zone was filled with drifting wreckage and silent ships. The enemy's last hope had failed. Humanity held the field completely, not through overwhelming force alone, but through emotional discipline forged by centuries of struggle. The galaxy felt the weight of that moment. This was not just the turning point of the war. It was the moment humanity proved that no amount of numbers could defeat a species that refused to break. The seventh phase of the battle was different. It was not defined by explosions or destroyed ships. It was defined by what humans carried inside them, the memories of all they had lost, the grief they had endured, and the quiet determination that had built over centuries. Inside the human flagship, the bridge was filled with the low hum of engines and the occasional beep of sensor alerts. Officers worked tirelessly, but there was a silence deeper than any noise in the war zone. They did not speak of glory or victory. They did not cheer when another enemy vessel vanished. Instead, they stared at the screens, watching the paths of death and destruction that were necessary but still weighed heavily on their hearts. For some of them, the war was personal. One commander remembered the colony on Kepler 9, where his parents had begged for evacuation and none had come. Another officer thought of the frontier station on Zeta 4, where children had waited alone for weeks before the enemy finally attacked. Those memories were sharp, raw, but they did not distract. They guided decisions. Each action in the war zone carried emotional weight. The fleet did not simply destroy. They calculated, they protected, they contained. Ships moved to shield civilians on nearby planets, evacuated small colonies as they advanced, and avoided unnecessary harm to systems that could still be saved. Humanity's emotional intelligence had become a weapon more powerful than lasers, missiles, or shields. The enemy did not understand this. Alien commanders still tried to intimidate and confuse, launching every last trick they had, but each failed almost before it began. Humans anticipated reactions not through logic alone, but through memory and empathy. Every act of cruelty attempted by the enemy was met with controlled precision, never wasted, never vengeful beyond what was necessary to stop further suffering. The alien crews felt this immediately. Confusion turned into fear, fear into despair, and despair into resignation. For the first time, many alien soldiers realized that their enemy was not motivated by conquest or pride. They were motivated by survival, yes, but more than that, they were motivated by the memory of what it felt like to be helpless, abandoned, and powerless. Inside one human destroyer, a young pilot gripped the controls tightly, staring at the battlefield. She had lost her entire squadron on the first day of the war, their lives taken in a moment when no one else could intervene. She had learned that fear could freeze a person in an instant, but grief could fuel focus like nothing else. That focus now guided her every move. The human fleet became a single organism, aware of losses, learning from pain, and turning it into discipline. They were not reckless, though the enemy might think so. Every strike was calculated, precise, and necessary. When enemy reinforcements tried to flank them, humans did not panic. Instead, small units broke off to intercept them, acting as shields for the main fleet while simultaneously striking the enemy's weak points. The alien commanders could not comprehend the coordination. To them, human emotion seemed to give them unpredictability, yet every action was perfectly in line with a higher purpose. Humanity's emotional core was showing itself on the battlefield. Grief, loss, memory, and the will to prevent others from suffering the same fate. That combination made them unstoppable. The Galactic Council watched in silent awe. Some members felt pride for the species they had underestimated. Others felt a shame so deep it could not be erased. How many opportunities had the Council given humanity to fail? How many times had they dismissed their warnings, their pleas, their strategies? And yet, humanity had survived, adapted, and now led the galaxy in a war it did not start, but would end. As the seventh phase continued, the remaining alien forces were crushed not only by firepower, but by the psychological weight of facing an enemy who understood every fear, every weakness, and every potential mistake. Alien ships moved aimlessly, systems shut down in confusion, and communication broke entirely. Humanity did not chase out of hatred. They moved forward with purpose. They did not celebrate every strike. They acknowledged the cost, every life lost, every home destroyed, every soul taken too early. That emotional depth became a weapon the enemy could not counter. They had no analog. No formula could predict it. No numbers could overwhelm it. The human fleet advanced like a storm, unstoppable not because they were stronger, but because they had learned the cost of weakness, and they refused to repeat it. By the end of the seventh phase, the Warzone was nearly silent. Alien resistance had crumbled, morale broken beyond repair. Human crews carried not only weapons and ships but centuries of history, memory, and grief, all converted into disciplined power. The galaxy felt a strange awe at what was happening. Humanity did not act recklessly. Humanity did not act out of anger. Humanity acted because they understood what it meant to lose everything and refused to let it happen again. That emotional truth was more terrifying than any laser, missile, or warship. The humans in the Warzone were unstoppable because they carried the weight of their past into every calculated strike, and the enemy finally understood that they were not just fighting a fleet, they were facing the very spirit of a species that refused to be powerless ever again. The eighth phase of the battle unfolded with a quiet inevitability. Alien leaders, desperate and broken, finally tried to reach out across the void. Holographic messages flickered through space, full of fear and pleading. They demanded ceasefire, promised submission, and begged for mercy. Some even offered territories, resources, and surrender in exchange for their lives. For the first time, the galaxy saw alien fear written plainly in their own communications. It was raw, unfiltered, and horrifying. The human fleet did not respond immediately. There was no jubilant announcement, no roar of triumph. They listened silently, analyzing every transmission, every hesitation, every implied threat. Inside the flagship, commanders and officers moved with calm precision. Their eyes were heavy with understanding, yet clear with purpose. These were humans who had lived through centuries of being underestimated, who had watched their home worlds burned, their colonies abandoned, and their people left to die by those who claimed wisdom. They knew the weight of mercy, and they knew its cost. Humanity did not answer in words. They answered in action. Every enemy ship that had the potential to strike again, every command center that could coordinate future attacks, was systematically neutralized. Precision strikes left nothing alive that could threaten life again. The alien fleet tried to flee, scattering in every direction, but escape routes had been calculated and sealed. Human ships did not pursue blindly. They moved with patience, surrounding enemy units, waiting until the moment was perfect, and then closing the net without hesitation. In the command bridge of one human battleship, a young officer glanced at the feed showing a drifting alien cruiser. It was still intact but powerless, its crew screaming in panic across the comm lines. He remembered the colony on Terra 2, a tiny settlement abandoned by the Council during the first wave of attacks. Families trapped and no one coming to help. That memory made his hands steady, his gaze unwavering. This was not revenge, but resolution. Humanity had learned the true cost of mercy and of hesitation. They had endured pain so deep that compassion had become strength, and strength had become their shield against chaos. Alien commanders realized too late that humanity was not cruel, but incorruptible. They were not fueled by hate, but by the memory of abandonment and the will to ensure it never happened again. Each alien transmission pleading for mercy was received, studied, and ignored when it did not guarantee safety for all. Humanity spared no chance for future suffering. Every act of hesitation or attempt to mislead was met with decisive action. The Galactic Council watched silently, some members unable to speak. They had seen the full breadth of human resolve, not just in battle, but in the moral clarity with which it was executed. Humans were not fighting for territory or for glory. They were fighting for survival, for justice, for the countless lives that would be lost if hesitation continued. The alien fleets began to collapse emotionally. Desperation turned into hysteria as systems failed, shields dropped, and ships drifted helplessly through the void. The humans did not chase with malice. They moved with purpose. They acted as the guardians of life, ensuring that no threat could rise again. Inside every human vessel, crew members felt the heavy weight of what they were doing. Each life lost in battle, each destroyed vessel, carried the memory of all humanity had suffered. They were not careless. They were deliberate. They were merciful in the only way that mattered, by ending the war completely, leaving no chance for repetition. The alien fleets, finally broken, sent their last transmissions, trembling, incoherent, begging for reason, for words, for survival. Humanity's answer was calm, absolute, and silent. There were no speeches. There was no triumph. There was only finality. By the end of the 8th phase, the Warzone had transformed into a vast, silent expanse of drifting wreckage. Alien ships no longer coordinated. Their crews were scattered, terrified, and powerless. The human fleet held steady, scanning, observing, ensuring the safety of every system in the area. The emotional power of this moment was felt across the galaxy. Humanity had not only won the war, they had done it with the clarity of purpose forged from centuries of loss, the discipline of a species that refused to be helpless, and the moral weight to ensure no one else would ever suffer the way they had. They were not cruel. They were not vengeful. They were determined. And in that determination, the galaxy realized something terrifying and undeniable. When humanity acted, the war ended. The 9th phase of the battle began in a strange silence. The enemy fleets, once arrogant and unstoppable, had been broken not just physically but emotionally. Fear hung in every remaining ship like a living thing, infecting crews, commanders, and entire fleets alike. Alien leaders barked orders, demanded strikes, and promised retaliation, but no one listened. Their words dissolved into static, drowned out by the quiet efficiency of humanity. The human fleet advanced steadily, not rushing, not panicking, not celebrating. Every move was measured, precise, and filled with purpose. For centuries, humanity had been underestimated. They had been ignored, ridiculed, and dismissed as a minor species incapable of true power. Those memories were alive in the minds of every human commander. They were the fuel behind every decision, every strike, every calculated move. Inside one human battleship, a veteran officer stared at the holomap of the Warzone. Each red marker represented an enemy ship, but it also represented the countless lives those ships had once threatened. The officer's eyes were steady, but deep inside, there was grief. Memories of burned colonies, of families lost to inaction, of pleas for help that went unanswered. They weighed heavily on him. Yet that grief did not slow him. It sharpened his focus, made his judgment precise. Humanity did not fight blindly. They fought with understanding, with clarity, and with the emotional weight of knowing exactly what could happen if they failed. Alien crews began to panic. Some fled in small groups, hoping to survive in the chaos, only to find that escape routes had been anticipated. Human ships moved like shadows, cutting off paths, closing corridors, isolating units without wasting energy or firepower on unnecessary destruction. Every action was deliberate. Every strike carried intention. Some human pilots paused briefly to avoid collateral damage to civilian systems still at risk. Others ensured that escaping ships that posed no immediate threat were monitored rather than destroyed. This restraint confused the enemy further. They could not understand a species that fought so ruthlessly yet with such moral clarity. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence. Some members felt shame, realizing how often they had dismissed humanity, how often they had underestimated a species that could balance emotion and discipline so perfectly. Others felt awe, sensing for the first time the full scope of what humanity was capable of. Humanity had learned the ultimate lesson of war. Emotion, when understood and guided, could become strength greater than weapons themselves. In the battlefield, alien ships that tried to regroup were systematically dismantled. Command structures collapsed as the human fleet advanced. Weapons that had once been feared were now irrelevant, destroyed or disabled before they could fire. Alien soldiers, terrified and demoralized, attempted to surrender, to negotiate, to plead for mercy, but humanity did not respond with words. Humanity responded with certainty. They acted to end the war, not for vengeance, not for pride, not for glory. Every strike was calculated to ensure no threat remained. Inside the human flagship, a young officer reflected quietly on the losses humanity had endured over centuries. Entire planets had fallen while others ignored their cries. Colonies had burned while the galaxy debated. Friends had died waiting for help that never came. Now humanity had learned. They had adapted. They had turned grief into focus, loss into strategy, and memory into precision. As the ninth phase drew on, alien resistance finally fractured completely. Fleets lost cohesion, commanders disappeared from communication channels, and crews abandoned stations. There was no hope left. Humanity moved through the war zone with patience, ensuring that no unit capable of future attack remained. This final dismantling was emotional as much as strategic. Human crews carried the weight of every life lost, every home destroyed, and every injustice suffered. Their actions were precise, their movements unyielding, and their purpose absolute. By the end of the ninth phase, the war zone was silent. The enemy no longer coordinated, no longer resisted, no longer hoped. The human fleet remained vigilant, moving slowly, scanning for any threat that might have survived. Every human officer, every pilot, every crew member felt the emotional burden of what they had done. They had ended a war not through rage, but through focus shaped by suffering. They had survived what the galaxy thought impossible and, in doing so, taught every observer an unshakable truth. Humanity did not forget. Humanity did not forgive weakness that endangered life. And humanity, when it acted, ended wars completely with neither hesitation nor mercy, but always with the emotional weight of what survival truly meant. The 10th phase of the war was not fought with weapons. It was fought with presence, with reputation, and with the weight of everything humanity had endured and accomplished. The alien fleets were broken beyond repair, scattered across the void, and the few remaining command ships had no coordination, no morale, no hope. Yet the Galactic Council, observing the aftermath, grew anxious. They realized that humanity's victory had changed everything. The humans did not seek glory or conquest. They had not claimed the enemy's territory. They had not demanded tribute. All they had done was act decisively to eliminate the threat, to protect life, to prevent future suffering. And yet, the power they wielded, the control they now demonstrated, terrified those who had always considered themselves the architects of galactic order. Council chambers buzzed with whispers, panic, and disbelief. Some members argued that humanity should be restrained, that their unchecked power could become a threat if left uncontrolled. Others argued that it was impossible to resist a species so precise, disciplined, and emotionally intelligent. In that tension, a message arrived from human command. It was not a demand, not a warning, not a threat. It was a statement of truth. We do not want your territory. We do not want your power. We fight only to protect life, to end threats before they can harm innocence again. We act not out of pride, not out of vengeance, but because we will not allow helplessness to continue. Humanity does not forget. Silence filled the council chambers. Members looked at each other, some with fear, some with shame. They remembered the countless moments they had underestimated humanity, dismissed them, ignored their warnings, and treated them as weak. Now, humanity had proven not only their power, but the wisdom born of suffering. On the battlefield, human ships held formation even as the enemy's remaining vessels drifted aimlessly. There was no celebration. There was no cheering. Each officer and crew member carried with them the emotional weight of every life lost, every colony burned, every mistake made by those who had ignored humanity's warnings. They did not gloat. They did not speak of glory. They acted with the quiet, relentless focus of a species that had endured the worst and refused to be weak again. Alien commanders, broken and trembling, finally understood the full scope of humanity's strength. It was not the size of their fleet, not the power of their weapons, not even the precision of their tactics. It was the combination of all these things with something the aliens could not comprehend: memory, grief, and the emotional intelligence to turn those into unstoppable strategy. For generations, humans had suffered. For centuries, they had been underestimated. And now, all of that suffering had been converted into discipline, into foresight, into a force that would not allow history to repeat itself. As the human fleet moved slowly through the remnants of the Warzone, every action carried weight. Ships moved to observe drifting enemy vessels, ensuring no survivors could regroup. Communication channels were monitored, not for revenge, but to protect life. Damage was repaired carefully, casualties treated with precision, and no action was wasted. Even in victory, the humans remained mindful of the cost. The Galactic Council realized something profound. They could have tried to assert control over humanity. They could have issued orders, made demands, or restricted their actions. But they understood now that humanity's moral compass was already absolute. No decree could improve upon it. Humanity did not act recklessly. Humanity did not act out of anger. Humanity acted because they understood suffering, because they carried centuries of grief, and because they refused to allow the helpless to be abandoned again. On a human command ship, the fleet admiral stared at the empty expanse where alien fleets had once moved with confidence. He remembered his family, lost worlds, and countless faces of innocents who had called for help and received none. That memory was not a burden. It was a guide, and it had led humanity to the edge of the galaxy, to the heart of war, and through it all to emerge disciplined, unstoppable, and morally unbreakable. By the end of the 10th phase, humanity had sent a clear message to every observer in the galaxy. They did not seek power, they did not seek glory, they did not seek revenge. They acted with precision, emotional clarity, and purpose. They acted because they had suffered and learned, and they would never allow suffering to go unchallenged again. The galaxy understood then that humanity was no longer just a species among many. They were a force shaped by pain, strengthened by memory, and guided by the weight of every life that had ever depended on them. Any who underestimated them again would do so at their own peril. The 11th and final phase of the battle was not about destruction. It was about truth. The human fleet, steady and unbroken, moved through the remnants of the Warzone as if carrying the weight of every life that had ever been lost in the galaxy. Every ship, every crew member, held within them centuries of memory. Of colonies burned while others looked away, of families lost because no one answered their calls, of warnings ignored by the councils and empires that had deemed humanity too small, too emotional, too insignificant. And now that memory had become unstoppable force. Alien forces, shattered and leaderless, floated helplessly among the drifting wreckage. They no longer attempted coordinated strikes. They no longer sent desperate messages. Fear had hollowed them out from within. Some fled blindly, others surrendered in silence, but none could escape the reality of what humanity had become. The human fleet did not celebrate. There was no cheering, no triumphal music, no sense of conquest. Each officer, each soldier, each pilot knew the cost. The cost of every action was written in the faces of those who had died before, in the empty worlds left behind, in the colonies that no longer existed. This was a victory, yes, but it was a solemn one. Humanity did not rejoice in death. They acknowledged it, carried it, and let it guide every decision. On the flagship, the admiral stared at the holographic map of the galaxy. Red marks and blinking lights showed where devastation had occurred, where the enemy had fallen. His eyes were steady, but inside, a quiet storm of grief and memory raged. Each marker represented lives lost. Not just enemies, but innocents who had suffered at the hands of the unstoppable violence unleashed upon the galaxy. And yet, humanity had acted not recklessly, not cruelly, not out of pride. They had acted with understanding, with purpose, with the weight of everything they had endured. That emotional clarity made them more terrifying than any weapon the aliens could have built. Even now, the Galactic Council watched, some in awe, some in shame, some in fear. They understood that humanity's power was not just in their fleet, their strategy, or their technology. Their true power lay in their memory, their discipline, and their moral certainty. They acted not for revenge, not for glory, but because they had lived through helplessness, and they refused to let it continue. For themselves, for the innocent, for the galaxy. Alien commanders sent their last fragmented messages, pleading, explaining, begging, but humanity did not answer. There was nothing to say. Words could not undo centuries of suffering, and humanity's silence spoke louder than any threat or promise. The human fleet moved slowly, deliberately, ensuring no threat remained. Ships with injured crews were treated, stations with damage repaired, and no opportunity to safeguard life was missed. Each movement was emotional, precise, necessary. Humanity had not only ended a war, they had rewritten the meaning of survival, the meaning of strength, the meaning of discipline in the galaxy. They had turned grief into strategy, loss into focus, suffering into moral clarity. And the message the galaxy received, through every action, every silent maneuver, was absolute. Humanity did not forget. Humanity did not forgive neglect. Humanity did not hesitate when life itself hung in the balance. And from this, every species, every empire, every council member learned a painful, undeniable truth. Never underestimate humanity. Never dismiss their warnings. Never forget what they have endured, because a species that remembers, that learns, that carries grief as focus, and that moves with moral certainty, is unstoppable. By the end of the 11th phase, the Warzone was silent. Alien fleets were dismantled, leadership destroyed, resistance gone. Human ships floated among the wreckage, calm and steady, not triumphant, not vindictive, not celebratory, but resolute. They had finished what needed to be done, and they had done it with the full weight of emotion, discipline, and history behind them. And in that quiet, in that unbroken presence, the galaxy finally understood who humanity truly was. Not just a species, but a force of unstoppable, emotional, and moral power that would never again allow helplessness to reign. Every observer felt it. When humanity acted, the war ended. Not with rage, not with chaos, not with arrogance, but with understanding, memory, and the disciplined certainty of a species that had learned the price of weakness and refused to pay it again.